Now let's try to develop a color picker using jQueryUI's slider widget. You might have seen different color pickers in different websites, and this is how our color picker will look like at the end. We can move these sliders to change the color, and here we will be displaying the color code, that is the hexadecimal color code. If I change this like this, the color is getting changed. If I move it to this side, it is getting changed. If I move all the sliders to the end, that is to the right hand side, the color will be white. See, the color is now #FFFFFF and it is white. And if I move the slider to the left hand side, the color will be black. It is #000000. So these are three different sliders for red, green and blue, and depending on how or where it is positioned, the color will be changing here, and we will be seeing different color codes as well. So we are going to develop this type of color picker using jQueryUI's slider widget. Okay, so let's start developing the color picker. Now this is the basic web page I have created, and I have added references to the required jQuery and jQueryUI files. I have added online reference this time. Okay. Next, let us add the elements within. So let me first add a div element with ID container. This is for styling purpose. Okay. Within this, let me add an h3 element and give the title like simple color picker. Okay, and within this let me add three div elements for sliders. So let me specify the ID to be red, then div ID to be green and div ID to be blue. So these are three different div elements for making them sliders. Next, let me add another div element with ID box. This is to display the color. Okay, so box, and finally I am adding a p element with ID color, where I am going to display color, then the color value, that is the hexadecimal color code. So these are the elements I have added within this div element. Next, let me style them. Let me first style the container div, that is the main container. Let me first set the width to be say 350 px, height to be 430 px, then border to be 2 px, solid silver. Then I want to have rounded corners. So let me specify border radius to be say 20 px, and finally a margin of 50 px auto, so that it will be centered with a margin of 50 px. Now let me save this, and this is how now the web page is looking like. This is the border, width is 350, height is 430. This is the h3 which is only visible now. Then rounded corners and margin of 50 px. I think we can increase the border size to be 5 px. Okay, so let me save this. Let me refresh. Okay, the border is now more thick. Next, let me style this h3 element. Okay, so here let me access the h3 element, and let me set the font size to be say 30 px. Okay, and let me also align it to center, and let me also specify the color to be purple. Okay, now let me save this. Let me refresh. See, this is how the heading is now looking like. Next, what we need to do, we need to make the three div elements as sliders. So we need to write the code for that, right? So let me specify dollar. What should I write? I need to write $document.ready, because we need to write our code within this. And here function, and within this let me specify the code. Okay, so what we need to do, we need to make these three red, green and blue div elements as sliders. So what should I write? Let me specify $#red, $#green, comma hash blue. At the end, let me specify slider. So these three div elements now became sliders, and I want to make them sliders starting from 0 to 255, because 0 is the minimum value allowed and 255 is the maximum value allowed. So I need to specify range to be min, so that it will allow from 0, and max to be 255. Now let's see our sliders now. Let me refresh. See, this is how our three sliders are now looking like. We have to style them if we want to display it more professionally. Okay, so now let's style these three sliders, that is div elements having IDs red, green and blue. So let's do that now. Here, let me access the sliders using their IDs red, blue and green. And within this, let me set the width for these items. So width, let the width be 300 px, because the total width of this container is 350 px, right? So let me set the width to be 300 px. And now let's see how it looks like. Refresh. See, now the width is specified. Now let me have a margin left, so that there will be a gap here, and also margin bottom, so that there will be a gap between the items. I don't want to have the same margin for all the sides. So let me specify margin left and margin bottom for these div elements. So let me specify, say margin left to be 20 px and margin bottom to be 30 px. So let me save this. Let me refresh. See, now this is how the items are looking like. That is, there is enough gap between the items, and also there is a gap of 20 px. If we want, we can change it, but I think this gap is enough, right? So 20 px is margin left and bottom is 30 px. Next, what we can do, we can actually style the box as well as the p element so that they will be visible. So let me specify hash box, and let me set a width of 125 px and also a height of 125 px, so that it will be like a square. Okay, then let me set border of 2 px solid black. Now let's see the output. See, this is how it is now looking like. I want to move this to the center. So how I can specify? I can specify margin to be 0 px auto. So it should be centered. Let me refresh. See, now this is centered. And let me also style the P. For that, if I want to see it, let me add a text like color. This is just to see it. Okay. And here let me style the P as well. Let me specify the font size for this. Let it be say 20 px, and I want to see it in bold. So font weight to be bold. Now let me see how it looks like. Let me refresh. Okay, it is looking like this. I want this to be centered. So how I can write it? I can write text align to be center, so that it will be centered. Let me refresh. See, this is now centered. Actually, I want this slider to be red, this to be green and this to be blue. Now the user will not be able to understand what is the red, green and blue values, right? So I want to make this whole slider, that is this one and also this handle to be red, and for this and this to be green, and for this and this to be blue. So what we can do to make these sliders appear in different colors, actually jQueryUI's slider widget offers two different classes called UI slider handle and UI slider range. This is the range and this is the handle. So using these two classes, we can style them as we want. So what we need to do here, we need to access the red div and its handle and range should be red, right? So let me specify UI slider hyphen range comma hash red dot UI slider handle. for these two, let me specify the background to be red. Now let's see whether we are getting the output as we expect. Let me refresh. See, this has become red, and if I move, this is now red. So both the range as well as the handle is now red. Next, for green and blue as well, I want to do the same. So let me copy this. Okay, and for blue, let me change this to blue and also this to blue. This is actually the ID of the development, right? And this is the color name, blue. And again for green also, I want to do the same. So green, hash green, and here the background color should be green. Now let me save this and let me refresh. Now it is red, green and blue, and if I move, we are here also seeing red, green and blue. Now we are ready with the front end, right? Next, what we need to do, we actually need to get the color code corresponding to these values and display this box in that particular color. So we will do it in the next lecture.